Hi everyone, it's Laura here, and in today's video I'm going to share with you 3 different cards that I created with the Heffy Doodle Absotoothly Awesome card kit. This card kit is really cute, I love the name, and it's really full of amazing supplies. I'm going to show it to you before we dive into the tutorial and we see what cards I created. The stamp set here is called Absotoothly Awesome, and it's so cute with these little fairies. I love them so much. You have some great sentiments too, and you can choose whether to get your kit with or without the coordinating dies to the stamp set. And I really love that the dies also die cut the word fairy. I think it's really great. This stencil here is called Twinkle, Twinkle, and it matches perfectly the fairy theme of the stamp set. You get 6 sheets of double-sided patterned paper in colors that match really nicely with each other and with the rest of the cardstock in the kit. So you get 2 sheets per color, and as you can see on each side of each sheet you have a different design. You get 2 A5 sized sheets of alcohol marker friendly white paper that I'm showing you right now, and I have to say that markers blend really easily on this paper. I was using my Spectrum Noir markers and I really enjoyed it. And then you get 3 sheets of lettered size colored card. You get a pink one, a mint one, and a light gray one. And on top of that, you also get 3 sheets of white letter size cardstock, so 8.5 by 11 inches. There is this cute little jar full of sequins that will work really nicely to create a shaker card or to add an embellishment to your projects. Then we have some sparkle holographic embossing powder by Wow and some Nouveau Shimmer powders. These are really fun. You also get a little spritzer, so you see you have everything you need to create cards with the supplies that are present in the kit. And lastly, you get this little finger dauber together with a pigment ink pad. This is silver and it's really fun. I had never used a metallic ink pad and I did using the one in this kit, and I think I have a new need. And now that we've seen the kit contents, we can move on and start having a look at the cards I created. I started by stamping my fairies on the alcohol marker friendly cardstock that was in the kit. I used scrapbook.com premium hybrid black ink and I'm going to color them with my Spectrum Noir markers. I'm not going to show you the coloring for all the fairies in the cards that I made today, but I wanted to show you the coloring at least once. It's rather sped up, so this won't take too much time away from the video tutorial, but I still thought it would be useful for you to see how I colored the fairies. I found some color combinations that would match pretty nicely with the cardstock colors that we have in the kit. So I have this pale pink and I will also find a color combination for a mint green. All the markers that I used will be listed on screen for your reference, and these are the only color combinations that I will be using throughout the 3 cards. Because I was creating multiple cards and I had found colors that worked with what I have in the kit, I didn't think I needed to explore more color combinations because I wanted to focus on finding some original card designs that I could create using supplies only in the kit. As you can see, I skipped over the coloring of the rest of the fairies because the color combinations were the same, and then I die cut everything with the coordinating dies. You can accessorize your fairies with crowns, toothbrushes, or little magical wands, so there is a lot to play around with this stamp set. The stamp set and the dies, by the way, as well as the stencil, can be purchased individually, but I think that the kit is quite a good value if you consider all the supplies, the paper, the cardstock that come with it. Coming back to the card, I decided to go with a grey card base for my first card today. So I trimmed down my cardstock and I scored it at 5.5 inches. So the entire length is 11 inches and then it's 4.25 inches wide, the panel that I am working on right now. I secured the Twinkle Twinkle stencil using the Heffy Doodle Memo tape, and now I am going over the stencil with the finger dauber and that silver pigment ink. And the result is really pretty. You have this metallic finish that you can maybe see a little bit right now, which adds a very nice touch to the background in a subtle way. For my focal panel, I decided to use some white cardstock and to add some interest to it using the Nouveau Shimmer powders. I diluted them with water and then I created some droplets with a paintbrush, and because shimmer powders have some mica powders in them, the little droplets are shimmery like my metallic background. I trimmed down a strip out of that striped lilac cardstock and I'm going to use it behind the white panel. And the size of the panel, by the way, is 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. Next, I stamped the sentiment on the bottom portion of my focal panel, and you can play around with the different greetings that you have on the stamp set and come up with different sentiments for different occasions. And in this case, I decided to go for the I love you so very much. At this point, I had everything ready, so I could go ahead and start assembling everything. I glued down the pattern paper stripe at an angle and then I trimmed off the excess with my guillotine trimmer. I'm going to adhere the focal panel on top of the strip, centering it with respect to my card base. And then I can go ahead and decorate everything with these 3 little fairies that I colored with different colors of spectrum noir markers. So I have 2 with a pink dress and 1 with a mint dress. I also added some accessories to create a little bit more interest on these fun little images, and that finished off card number 1. For card number 2, I decided to go for a mint card base and to create my own pattern paper with the smaller images in the Absotoothly Awesome stamp set. I mounted some of them on an acrylic block and then I'm going to ink them up with this silver pigment ink and stamp them all over my card base, making sure to change the orientation of my acrylic block so that I create a truly random pattern. It's also nice if you sort of stamp your images off of your card front or whatever panel you are creating your custom pattern paper on, because it will really look like you have trimmed down the pattern paper from a larger sheet, if that makes sense. I then took some grey cardstock and I trimmed it to roughly 2 by 5 inches so that I would have a strip that's not as tall as my card front, and I'm going to adhere it to the left portion of the card front itself. But before that, I decided that I wanted to add a little bit more interest to this panel too. So I took the image with the little stars in the set, I stamped it again all over this panel, this time with Versamark ink, and then I used the holographic clear embossing powder by Wow that's also in the kit to coat the entire panel. I'm using a white piece of paper to gather the excess embossing powder so that I can funnel it back into the jar, and then I can use my heat gun to melt the embossing powder. And I'm holding the cardstock with my reverse tweezers so that I don't accidentally burn my hands with my heat tool. I adhered the strip to the front of my card and then I moved on and started working on the sentiment. You actually have to be careful not to stamp over the embossed lines. I wanted the sentiment to overlap the grey strip a little bit. In this case, I have to be honest, I did not plan it in advance, but I was lucky enough to have space for my sentiment. But maybe you want to do the stamping first and then the heat embossing so that you're sure that you have enough space. At this point, I thought I was done, but actually the card front was looking a little bit too plain for my taste anyway. So I decided to stamp a few of the teeth in the stamp set over some more white cardstock, the alcohol marker friendly one. I stamped like 5 or 6 and I quickly added some shading to them using my Spectrum Noir markers again. I die cut them with the coordinating dies and then I adhered them to my card front. And I have to apologize because I didn't realize that my camera had stopped recording while I was gluing everything to the card front. But really all I did, as I said, was just adding some quick shading, die cutting the teeth and then arranging them like you will see in a moment. And here is the card. The teeth are glued flat to my card front while the fairy is raised over one strip of foam tape. And I also added some stitching detail all around the card front using a white Sakura Jelly Roll pen. For my third and last card, I played a little bit more with the design and with layers, and I started by creating a square that I'm going to layer with some pattern paper. So I have the mint square that is roughly 2 by 2 inches, and the pattern paper is 1 3/4 by 1 3/4 inches. I adhered them one on top of each other so that the mint cardstock would create a nice border around the pattern paper, and then I moved on and started working on the card base. This time I chose pink, so I have 1 mint, 1 gray and 1 pink card base, and I covered all the colors in the kit. I decided to create a central strip out of some white cardstock and I trimmed it down to 5.5 by roughly 3.25 inches, I believe, but I will write the measurements on screen. I layered the white cardstock to some strips that I trimmed out of the mint paper, and this will separate the white cardstock from the pink background and will sort of lift our focal panel a little bit. I'm using Nuvo Deluxe adhesive and I'm also using the grid on my media mat to help me position everything as straight as I can. I then created a smaller square, again using some mint cardstock and that pink pattern paper with the polka dots, and this will be the focal point for my second fairy on the card. So on the final designs, I will have those 2 squares with the fairies on top, and the fact that they are a little bit different in size will make the design more interesting. Speaking of interest, I decided to add some on this white panel. I protected the strips of mint cardstock using the Heffy Doodle Memo tape, and then I started using the pigment ink, the silver pigment ink, and my Twinkle Twinkle stencil to add some shimmer. Because this is a pigment ink and it dries a little bit slowly, I could use the embossing powder on top, and this created some extra shimmer on my card. And then lastly, I decided to add some droplets also on the card base, again by diluting my Nuvo shimmer powders with some water and then by using a paintbrush to create the droplets. This is not watercolor cardstock, so don't go too heavy with the water, but this was perfectly fine. There was no peeling and no warping of the paper at all. I went ahead and glued down everything, and as you can see, I also added the image with the moon and the clouds, and I also went ahead and stamped and die cut the word fairy. Also in this case, I had to play around with the positioning of the rest of the sentiment a little bit because I have those embossed pattern from the stencil on my card base and I cannot stamp on top of that. So maybe if you create this card again, reverse the order and first stamp and then hit emboss. And as a last touch, because I felt that the design was a little bit empty above the sentiment, I added that little wand. So let's have a quick look at all the cards that I created today. It was really fun to use this kit, and it was fun to challenge myself to only create using supplies from the kit. And I have to say that I really like the way these cards turned out, and I think that these fairies are just too adorable. Here is what I'm left with. As you can see, I have a lot of paper and pattern paper still. I have my stamp set and my die set. The magnetic sheet is something I added because that's how I store my dies. I have the stencil, and then I still have the ink pad, the embossing powder, it's all there basically. I have this finger dauber, the Nuvo Shimmer powders, which I really love, and the little spritzer. So you can see there is a lot of supplies in the kit, and even after creating these 3 cards, I still have a lot to play with. And that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below letting me know which card was your favorite. Make sure to check the description box down below because there I will have a list of the supplies that I used with links to the shops where you can get them if you're interested. If you haven't already, you can subscribe to my channel for more card making, paper crafting, and since last month, bullet journaling inspiration. As always, thank you all so much for stopping by and have a great day.